Ambassador Wei stood in the center of the Grand Assembly Hall, surrounded by representatives from 847 different species. The chamber stretched upward into a crystalline dome that reflected light from 1,000 different worlds. He had been summoned here on emergency orders, pulled from a trade negotiation on Europa without explanation. Now looking at the faces around him, some with faces, others with sensor clusters, and a few that were just clouds of organized gas, he felt a growing sense of unease. High Arbiter of the Dominion rose from the central platform. The wings rustled with what had learned to recognize as nervousness. That was never a good sign. Had overseen the tribunal for 2 centuries and had a reputation for being unflappable. The Intergalactic Tribunal has reached a unanimous decision, announced, his translator rendering the clicks and whistles into perfect Mandarin for benefit. Effective immediately, humanity is banned from participating in any military conflicts within tribunal space. The chamber erupted. Some delegates made sounds of relief. Others shuffled or vibrated or changed colors in ways that cultural training identified as embarrassment. A few actually applauded. Blinked, "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" "You are banned from wars," Ambassador said, and there was something almost apologetic in his tone. "All wars, any conflicts, military actions of any kind." "But why?" Looked around the chamber. "We've been faithful allies, we've honored every treaty, we've never started a conflict with any member species." "That is precisely the problem," said representative of the Empire. The massive reptilian stood, his scales gleaming red with what recognized as shame. "You never start conflicts, yet you win them all." His mind raced back through the past 15 years since humanity had joined the tribunal. The border skirmish came to mind first. They had been expanding into a disputed sector, and 3 smaller species had asked for human assistance. The Empire had won every war in their 600-year history. They had military academies older than human civilization. They had tactics refined across. The human fleet had ended the war in 3 weeks. Remembered the reports from the commanding officer, Admiral. The fought with honor, following strict rules of engagement that had been perfected over centuries. They announced their fleet movements. They challenged opposing ships to single combat. They refused to attack damaged vessels. The humans had studied those rules, respected them in negotiations, then promptly ignored them in battle. They hit supply lines. They used decoys. They attacked at night, a concept that, with their excellent daylight vision, had never really incorporated into their tactics. When the fleet moved to intercept what they thought was the human main force, they found cargo haulers with sensor spoofing equipment. The real human fleet was already landing ground forces on the disputed colonies. "You made us look like fools," said quietly. "Our people have fought for honor for 600 years. You defeated us using tactics our youngest cadets would be expelled for suggesting." "We fought to win," said. "Isn't that the point?" "That is exactly what frightens us," replied. Then there was the defense of 442B. The swarm of tar had descended on the mining colony, expecting easy prey. The swarm fought through overwhelming numbers and instinctive coordination. They had consumed 17 civilizations. Their tactics were literally genetic, passed down through evolutionary memory. A single human garrison of 200 soldiers had held them off for 2 months until reinforcements arrived. The swarm retreated, something they had never done in recorded history. Had read that after-action report 3 times, still not quite believing it. The human commander, a young captain named, had realized the swarm's coordination was their weakness. They moved like a single organism because they essentially were one. So she had created chaos, random explosions, irregular patrol patterns, music, loud, unpredictable human music, played over external speakers at all hours. The swarm's perfect coordination had shattered into confusion. "You turned our greatest strength into a weakness," the Tar Queen chittered from her position in the assembly. You saw into the heart of what we are and used it against us. How does one defend against an enemy who does this? More conflicts bubbled up in memory. The pirate wars, where humanity had allied with the peaceful. There were pure energy beings, pacifists who had never raised a weapon in their thousand-year history. Pirates had preyed on their trading vessels for decades. The tribunal had sent peacekeeping forces twice, but the pirates always came back. Humanity had trained volunteers to serve on human warships, not as soldiers, they would never agree to that, but as sensor operators and communications officers. Their ability to perceive electromagnetic fields made them perfect for detecting cloaked ships. The pirate strongholds were eliminated in 6 months. The pirates had surrendered, which was apparently unusual, had asked the fleet commander about that. The woman had shrugged and said, "We convinced them that continued fighting was more expensive than honest work. Then we offered them jobs in the new trade security force. Why kill them when we could recruit them?" That philosophy had apparently horrified half the tribunal. Then there was the incident with the methane breathers and the silicate collective. 2 species, completely incompatible biology, fighting over a planet that neither could actually live on but both wanted for its resources. They had been at war for 40 years. Humanity had been asked to mediate. Instead, the human negotiating team had somehow ended up fighting both sides. Still wasn't entirely clear on how that had happened. Something about the methane breathers firing on what they thought was a silicate ship, but was actually a human diplomatic vessel. Then the silicates had assumed humanity was allied with the methane breathers and attacked a human mining station. The war had lasted 6 weeks. Humanity fought both species simultaneously, defeated both, then sat them down at a negotiating table and hammered out a resource-sharing agreement that had them both better off than when they started. The human negotiator had later explained that sometimes people needed to lose a fight before they were ready to have a real conversation. "We did not ask you to defeat them," said, bringing back to the present. "We asked you to mediate." "They wouldn't mediate until they were ready to stop fighting," replied. "We made them ready." "Exactly," said. "You see the problem." Looked around the chamber again. He was starting to understand. Every species here had their own military traditions, their own ways of warfare that had developed over millions of years of evolution. The had honor. The swarm had genetic memory. The silicates had patience that came from living for centuries. The methane breathers had religion. Humans had 15 years in the galactic community, and a willingness to throw out any rule that didn't work. "You are reshaping the military balance of the entire tribunal," continued. "Not through conquest, which we could understand and counter, through victory. Every conflict you enter, you win. Every species you fight alongside becomes more effective. Every enemy you face either adapts or loses. You are changing warfare itself simply by participating in it." "Is that such a bad thing?" asked. "We do not know," said honestly, "and that is what frightens us most." The High Arbiter gestured, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed a star map of tribunal space, with markers for every military conflict in the past 50 years. Conflicts involving humanity were marked in blue. The blue markers won, every single one of them. "We have analyzed your combat engagements," said. "All 47 of them. We have studied your tactics, your strategies, your innovations. Our military experts from 200 species have contributed to this analysis." He held up a small crystal data storage device. "The conclusions are troubling." Felt a chill run down his spine. Troubling how? "You do not fight like a species, ambassador. You fight like a force of nature, and we do not know how to coexist with that." The vote had already been taken, realized. This wasn't a trial, it was a sentencing. Humanity was too good at war, so they were being banned from participating in it. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so concerning. "What happens if we're attacked?" asked. "Are we allowed to defend ourselves?" "Within your own territory you may do as you wish," said, "but you may not enter conflicts in tribunal space, even on behalf of allies. You may not train other species in warfare. You may not provide military advisors or tactical consultation. You are banned from all aspects of warfare within our borders." Took the data crystal when handed it to him. It felt heavier than it should have. "I will convey this decision to my government," said formally, "though I suspect they will find it as bewildering as I do." "We expect they will," said. "For what it is worth, Ambassador, this decision was not made lightly. Many here consider humanity to be valued friends, but friendship and fear can coexist, and right now, the tribunal fears what you represent more than it values what you offer." Left the Grand Assembly Hall in a daze, the crystal tucked safely in his diplomatic pouch. Behind him, he could hear the representatives beginning to disperse, speaking in relieved tones. They had solved their problem. They had banned the species that kept winning wars. He wondered if they had considered what might happen if someone else started winning instead. The briefing room in the United Nations headquarters in Geneva was tense. Had uploaded the crystal's contents to the secure server, and now Earth's military and political leaders were reviewing 300 hours of combat analysis compiled by the galaxy's best strategic minds. General of the United Earth Defense Force was the first to speak. "They banned us because we're too good at war. That's actually hilarious." "It's concerning," countered Secretary General. "We've spent 15 years building alliances and trade relationships. This could jeopardize everything." "Did you read the analysis?" Gestured at the screen displaying the tribunal's findings. "They've identified why we win, and honestly, they're not wrong." Had read it on the flight back to Earth. The tribunal's military experts had broken down human warfare into components that could be studied and understood. What they found had clearly disturbed them. Factor 1. Adaptability. Most species in the tribunal had military doctrines that had evolved over millions of years. They had been perfecting honor-based warfare since before humans discovered fire. The swarm's tactics were literally encoded in their DNA. These species could adapt, but slowly, carefully, within the boundaries of what their culture and biology allowed. Humans threw out entire battle plans on instinct. A human officer could spend years training in one tactical framework, then abandon it completely in the middle of a fight if they saw something better. The tribunal analysts had found 23 separate instances where human commanders had invented entirely new tactical approaches during active combat. "They fight like every battle is the first battle they've ever fought," one analyst had written. "They have no respect for tradition, no attachment to proven methods. They simply do whatever appears most likely to work in that specific moment." Factor 2. Endurance psychology. This was the part that had clearly disturbed the alien analysts most. Most sapient species evolved as either predators or prey. Predators ambushed, used overwhelming force quickly, then retreated if they failed. Prey fled, hid, or used defensive measures. Conflict for them was meant to be brief and decisive. Humans were persistence hunters. Earth's ancient ancestors had hunted by simply following prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. That psychology had apparently translated directly into human warfare. The siege of Arcturus was highlighted as a prime example. A human defensive force had maintained active combat operations for 18 months straight. The attacking force, a pirate coalition, had expected the humans to need resupply, rotation, and relief within weeks. Standard doctrine suggested that no military force could maintain combat effectiveness for more than 3 months without significant degradation. The humans had not only maintained effectiveness, they had escalated. New defensive positions appeared weekly. Raid patterns became more aggressive. Morale somehow improved. The pirates finally, not because they couldn't break the defense, but because they realized the humans would literally never stop fighting. "They do not defend like prey or attack like predators," a TAR analyst had noted. They defend like predators who have decided their territory is worth holding forever. This should not be possible. Factor 3. Collaborative warfare. This was perhaps the most dangerous factor from the tribunal's perspective. Humans bonded with other species in ways that created genuinely integrated military forces. When humanity had allied with the against pirates, the tribunal had expected a standard mercenary arrangement. Instead, human officers had spent months learning philosophy, culture, and communication methods. They had created hybrid tactical frameworks that played to both species' strengths. The result wasn't humans with support or with human protection. It was something new, a combined force that fought more effectively than either species could alone. The analysis included interviews with who had served on human ships. One described a human captain who had learned to perceive electromagnetic fields the way they did, through technological augmentation and months of training. The captain had then taught other humans, creating a sensor network that could detect threats they had never been able to counter. They do not conquer or absorb, the report concluded. They integrate. They make every ally stronger, and every strengthened ally makes them stronger in turn. This creates an exponential growth in capability that cannot be easily countered. Watch the military leaders process this information. Some looked proud, others looked worried, a few looked both. So they're afraid we'll make them better at war, said. That tracks. Most of these species have stable military doctrines. We come in and destabilize everything. It's more than that, said. He pulled up a specific section of the report. Read this part from himself. The High Arbiter's analysis appeared on screen. Humanity wins wars not through superior force or technology, but through superior learning. They learn from every engagement, every mistake, every enemy. More concerning, they teach. Every species they fight alongside comes away changed, improved, and thinking about warfare in new ways. If this continues unchecked, the entire tribunal's military structure will be reshaped in humanity's image within a generation. This is not conquest, but it may be more profound than conquest. The room fell silent. They're not afraid we'll beat them, said slowly. They're afraid we'll change them. And they're right to be afraid, said a new voice. Everyone turned. Dr. Lee, the chief military historian for the Defense Force, had entered the room quietly. She was an elderly woman who had studied warfare across cultures and eras for 50 years. Every species in the tribunal fights the way they've always fought, Lee continued. Humans don't. We steal tactics from every enemy we face. We incorporate lessons from every ally. We are the least traditional military force in the galaxy, and that makes us the most dangerous. She pulled up her own analysis on the screen. I've been reviewing this data alongside historical examples from Earth. Do you know what humanity's approach most resembles? Alexander the Great's conquest of Persia, not in scope or brutality but in method. Alexander didn't just conquer, he learned. He adopted Persian cavalry tactics, incorporated local troops, married into local nobility. He changed warfare by changing himself. That worked out well for everyone, someone muttered, until his empire collapsed. Actually, it did work out well, Lee countered. The Hellenistic period that followed spread Greek culture and learning across the known world and absorbed Eastern knowledge in return. It was one of the most productive cultural exchanges in human history. The tribunal is afraid of exactly that kind of exchange. Leaned back in her chair. So what do we do? Just accept the ban? We might not have a choice, said. Violating it would mean ejection from the tribunal, possibly war. His communicator buzzed. He glanced at it, then froze. We may have a different problem. He projected the message for everyone to see. It was from the tribunal's emergency network, marked urgent. Clans invade Terminus Sector. 3 member species request immediate military assistance. Who are the asked? A species that refused to join the tribunal, replied, his fingers flying across his. They considered it too restrictive. Large, aggressive, technologically advanced. They've been quiet for years, mostly raiding on the frontier. More messages were flooding in now. Projected them one by one. The picture they painted was grim. They had launched a massive invasion of the Terminus sector, a resource-rich area controlled by 3 tribunal species, and the Sistine Coalition. The tribunal had sent defensive forces. All 3 had been defeated in the opening engagements. How bad? Asked. Bad, said, reading through tactical reports. They are using. Wait. He stopped, rereading one section carefully. What is it? Asked. Looked up, his face pale. They are using human tactics. He projected a tactical analysis from a commander. They had hit supply lines first. They used decoys and sensor spoofing. They attacked at unexpected times, in unexpected ways. They ignored traditional rules of engagement that the tribunal species expected. They've been watching us, breathed, studying our conflicts. They learned from us. And now they're using our own methods against species who have no idea how to counter them, Lee said, because we're banned from helping. Another message came through, this one from himself, marked private and routed through back channels to his personal communicator. Ambassador, I speak to you now not as High Arbiter but as someone who has watched every recording of human combat operations. I have a question that haunts me. How do your people live with it? The violence you are capable of, yet the mercy you consistently show. Every war you've won decisively. Yet you always offer terms. You always seek peace. You could have conquered, yet you chose alliance. How? Read the message twice, then looked at the assembled leaders. He's asking for help. He can't officially, not with the ban in place, but he's asking. That's not our problem, someone said. They banned us, remember. Let them solve it themselves. They can't, said, studying the tactical reports. Look at these engagements. They are using modified human tactics but without human restraint. They're not offering surrender terms. They're not protecting civilians. They're just taking what they want. So the tribunal created exactly the enemy they feared, Lee said. A species that fights like humans but doesn't think like humans. Stood packing to the window overlooking Lake Geneva. Outside, the city gleamed in the afternoon sun, peaceful and prosperous. Earth had enjoyed 15 years of unprecedented cooperation with alien civilizations. Trade, cultural exchange, scientific collaboration, all of it built on the foundation of trust. Trust that was now in question. What happens if we help? She asked. We'd be violating the ban. What happens if we don't? Countered. 3 tribunal species are about to be conquered by an enemy using tactics they learned from watching us. We bear some responsibility for that. Do we? Someone challenged. We didn't teach thee anything. They stole knowledge from public observations. Doesn't matter, said. Responsibility isn't about intent, it's about consequence. We changed galactic warfare just by existing. They are proof of that. His communicator buzzed again. This time it was a formal message from the tribunal, broadcast to all member species. Terminus sector defenses collapsing. Emergency session called. All available forces requested for defense operations. They're desperate, said. 3 defeats in a week. They're not used to losing. Maybe that's the real problem, Lee said quietly. The tribunal has enjoyed relatively peaceful coexistence for centuries. Minor conflicts, sure, but nothing existential. They've forgotten what real war looks like. We never did. The room fell silent again. Everyone was thinking the same thing, realized. Humanity had been shaped by conflict. Wars had marked every century of human history. The 20th century alone had seen 2 global conflicts that reshaped civilization. Humans understood war in their bones in ways most tribunal species simply didn't. And that understanding included something they apparently lacked, knowing when to stop. I want to know something, said, turning from the window. If we help, can we actually make a difference? Or are we just delaying the inevitable? pulled up a tactical display of the Terminus sector. "They are good. They've learned our tactics well, but they're missing something crucial." "What?" asked. "They learned how we fight. They didn't learn why we fight the way we do. They see the tactics but not the philosophy behind them." Highlighted several engagement patterns. "Look here. They're using our hit-and-run methods, but they're not offering exits. They trap enemy forces instead of leaving them a way to retreat. That works for inflicting casualties, but it makes every fight a death match. It's exhausting and costly." "And they're not adapting," Lee added, studying the reports. "They have one playbook, the one they stole from us. When the Tribunal forces tried new defensive approaches in the third engagement, they just hit harder using the same tactics. A human commander would have switched approaches." "So we can beat them," said. "Probably," agreed. "But that's not the question, is it? The question is whether we should." Thoughtabout's private message. The High Arbiter was afraid of humanity's capacity for violence, yes, but he was also puzzled by humanity's capacity for mercy. The two things seemed contradictory to him. They weren't, though. Not to humans. Humanity had learned through bloody experience that winning wars meant nothing if you lost the peace afterward. The 20th century had taught that lesson twice, brutally. World War I had been won decisively, with harsh peace terms that bred resentment and led directly to World War II. The Second War had been won even more decisively, but with peace terms that rebuilt enemies into allies. The Tribunal feared humanity would change them. Maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. "I think we should help," said. "Not because we owe the Tribunal anything, not to prove we're good allies, but because if we don't, they will learn the wrong lesson." "Which is?" asked. "That human tactics without human philosophy can conquer the galaxy. That violence without purpose is enough. That winning is the only thing that matters," met her eyes. "We need to teach them and the Tribunal that there's a reason we fight the way we do, and it's not just about winning." The debate continued for hours. Arguments were made for staying out of it, for respecting the ban, for not risking Earth's position in the galactic community. Counterarguments emphasized responsibility, the danger of the threat, and the moral obligation to help allies even when those allies had turned their backs. Finally called for a vote, the decision was close but clear. Earth would help, but not in the way anyone expected. The volunteer force that arrived at Terminus Sector 3 weeks later was carefully not called an army. They were military consultants, a semantic distinction that fooled absolutely no one, but allowed the Tribunal to accept their help without officially violating the ban. Commander, the ambassador's daughter and a decorated officer, led the force. She had handpicked every member, looking for people who understood not just how to fight, but how to teach. The Tribunal forces in Terminus Sector were in disarray when she arrived. They had lost half their ships. The defensive positions had been overrun. The Sistine Coalition was preparing to evacuate their colonies. Morale was shattered. His first meeting with the combined Tribunal command staff did not go well. "You are here to save us," said Commander Brightwing of the, her energy form pulsing dimly with exhaustion. "To use your superior tactics to defeat the—" "No," said flatly, "we're here to teach you to save yourselves." The room erupted in protests. They didn't have time for training. They needed immediate military action. They were advancing on 3 fronts. Every day delayed meant more casualties, more lost territory. Waited for them to finish. Then she pulled up holographic displays of the recent engagements. "They are using human tactics," she said. "They hit supply lines. They use unpredictable attack patterns. They employ psychological warfare. You've been trying to counter this by doing what you've always done, following established military doctrine. How's that working for you?" The silence was answer enough. "The problem isn't that you need human tactics," continued. "It's that you're trying to fight like yourselves while the enemy fights like us. That will never work. You need to fight like yourselves, but better." She zoomed in on the ship formations. "Commander Brightwing, your people perceive electromagnetic fields, correct?" "Yes, but—" "So you can detect this communication networks. Every ship in their fleet is coordinating through standard radio frequencies. You could map their entire command structure from orbit." Brightwing's glow brightened slightly. "We use that ability for navigation, not warfare." "Start using it for warfare. Partner with ground forces. They have armored shells that make them nearly invulnerable to this energy weapons. Put as forward observers with as assault troops. You map the enemy positions, they punch through them." General of the rumbled thoughtfully. "My people have always fought defensively. Our shells make us excellent at holding positions." "Exactly," said. "So stop trying to maneuver like humans. They are expecting that because they it from us. Instead, identify the key positions that matter most and turn them into fortresses that can't break. Make them come to you, then bleed them dry trying to dig you out." She turned to the Sistine Coalition representative, a collective intelligence that spoke through multiple small bodies. "And your people's strength is distributed thinking. You don't have single points of failure because you don't think as individuals. Use that." "How?" the Sistine Hive speaker asked. "Create redundant command networks. Make it impossible for them to behead your leadership because your leadership is everywhere. Every unit operates semi-independently but coordinates through your collective consciousness. They are used to targeting command ships and expecting fleets to fall apart. Your fleets won't have command ships. Step back, letting them absorb the ideas. They'll learn to fight like humans, but they're not fighting humans right now. They're fighting you. Each of you has abilities and strengths that humans don't have. Stop trying to be human in combat and start being yourselves." Over the following weeks, the transformation was remarkable. They began using their electromagnetic perception as a tactical network, coordinating attacks with precision that they couldn't counter. Forces dug into positions that became impassable obstacles. The Sistine Coalition's distributed intelligence meant that destroying their ships only made their fleet more unpredictable as individual units adapted independently. The expecting fragmented resistance found themselves facing a coordinated defense that played to each species' natural strengths. More frustratingly for them, they found themselves facing an enemy that predicted their moves. The Battle of Terminus Prime was the turning point. The commander, certain of victory, had massed his fleet for a decisive assault on the sector capital. He expected to find a desperate last stand, maybe some clever human trap. Instead, he found a defense that he couldn't crack. Fortifications absorbed his bombardment. Sensor networks spotted every flanking attempt before his ships could execute them. Sistine Coalition forces swarmed his supply lines with a coordination that seemed almost prescient, because it was, with hundreds of minds thinking as one. When the fleet found itself surrounded, cut off from supplies and reinforcements, the commander prepared for annihilation. That's what his species would deliver. That's what the tactics he'd stolen suggested. Instead, he received a transmission from Commander. She appeared on his screen, calm and professional. "Your fleet is surrounded," she said without preamble. "Your supply lines are cut. You've taken significant casualties. I'm offering you terms of surrender." The commander's translator struggled with his response. Shock, apparently, was difficult to render in human language. "Terms. You will withdraw from Terminus Sector. You will return captured personnel and equipment. In exchange, we guarantee safe passage for your fleet and will provide medical assistance for your wounded. We'll also discuss your clan's application to join the Intergalactic Tribunal if you're interested." "Why?" the question seemed to burst from him. "You have defeated us. Why offer terms?" Smiled slightly. "Because you fought well. You learned tactics from watching us and you used them effectively. You lost because you missed the most important part." "Which is?" "Knowing when to stop fighting. War isn't about proving you're the strongest. It's about achieving objectives. Your objective was to capture the Terminus sector. That failed. Continuing to fight now doesn't change that. It just wastes lives on both sides." The commander was silent for a long moment. "We studied your battles. We learned your tactics. We thought we understood how humans fight." "You learned how we fight," agreed. "But not why we fight the way we do. Tactics without philosophy is just choreographed violence. We fight to win, yes, but we win to create peace. That's the difference." The surrender was formally accepted 3 hours later. The clans, impressed and somewhat bewildered by the concept of mercy from a position of strength, petitioned to join the tribunal within a month. 6 months after the Battle of Terminus Prime, Ambassador Wei stood once again in the Grand Assembly Hall. The chamber felt different this time, less tense. The representatives watched him with something approaching respect instead of fear. High Arbiter rose to address the assembly. "The ban on human participation in military conflicts is hereby lifted. In its place, humanity is granted a permanent seat on the tribunal's peacekeeping council." The vote was unanimous. Looked around the chamber, seeing the subtle changes. Forces now included tactical sensor networks. They had reorganized their military around defensive strongholds. The Sistine Coalition had restructured their entire command framework. Even the proud and traditional had begun incorporating flexibility into their doctrine. Humanity hadn't conquered the tribunal's military structure. They had taught it to evolve. Approached after the session. "You were right to help despite the ban, and I was right to fear you." "Both can be true," said. "Indeed." Wings rustled in what had learned to recognize as amusement. "We banned you because you won every war, but we misunderstood why you won. We thought it was because you were better at violence. And now we understand that you are better at ending violence. There is a profound difference." Thought about his daughter's message from Terminus Prime. She had described the moment when the commander realized he could surrender with honor, that violence and defeat didn't have to mean annihilation, that there was strength in knowing when to stop fighting. "The point of being good at war," said slowly, "is so you can choose peace from a position of strength. Otherwise, you're just fighting for its own sake." "That is the lesson we needed to learn," said. "We used to fight wars to win them. Now, thanks to humanity, we fight them to end them. That is your real tactical innovation." Smiled. "We learned it the hard way. Centuries of warfare taught humanity that winning doesn't matter if you can't build peace afterward. We figured you shouldn't have to learn the same lesson through the same bloody experience." "So you changed us after all," observed. "We feared that, but perhaps we feared the wrong kind of change." Reports were already coming in from across tribunal space. Human military advisors were embedded in dozens of species' armed forces now, not as conquerors or overlords, but as teachers and partners. Each species was learning to fight better as themselves, not as imitation humans. The galaxy's military balance had been reshaped, not through human domination but through human collaboration. Every species was stronger, every alliance was deeper, and the wars that did occur were shorter, less destructive, and more likely to end in genuine peace. Chimed with a message from his daughter. She was working with the now, helping them develop their own tactical frameworks that incorporated their natural strengths. They, it turned out, had remarkable long-range sensors and patience that bordered on geological. They were learning to fight as watchers and snipers, not as imitators of human aggression. "Do you know what I added to your combat record in our archives?" asked. Shook his head. "Victory through compassion. That was the pattern we could not understand at first. You won decisively, but you never forgot what you were fighting for. You never let victory become an end in itself. You fought to create something better, not just to destroy something worse." The High Arbiter's wings spread slightly, a gesture of respect. "That is why you kept winning, Ambassador, not because you were better at war, because you understood that war is not the